Hey, fellow casuals, it's Ryan, your favorite host, but keep that secret between us, though. This is a disclaimer that this episode was recorded before our Arcane Season 2 coverage, so if you notice some outdated references, don't worry, they'll be addressed in the future. Now, enjoy the episode, and don't tell Hetch about our little secret. He's self-aware too that when people react to him just appearing places, to him he's just walking, but he's phasing in and out of the spirit realm. So distance is different and whatever. But to him, he doesn't concern himself with such quibbles.
Like, your sense of comfort means nothing to me. I'm just going to the store.
That's like a Dark Souls boss line. Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 162. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Hetch.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? And we've got a fun one for today.
Yeah, if you listened to our last episode, we gave you a little hint. I guess it was a big hint.
Okay, no. Was it even a hint? Because you just gave them an answer. I pretended like it was a hint.
We're talking about Shen, and specifically Shen's story, True Neutral, which is a great one.
Yeah, this is a really, really good story. But I mean, if you've listened to some of our other episodes involving a lot of the Ionian characters, there are a lot of good stories surrounding characters like Shen and Akali and Zed. So this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and if you've listened to any of our other episodes, they all have housekeeping. So we're going to do that again. You can listen to us everywhere. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Remember, that's podcastcor.com for all of our info. Email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. Follow us on all the platforms because that helps us and we appreciate it. And then leave a like and comment wherever you listen. But word of mouth has gotten us this far, so tell a friend to maintain balance in all things by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast. True Neutral.
Yes. Yeah, maintain balance. The story's true neutral. That's right. This is going to be the most neutral episode ever. So dump out your drink and fill it up with water instead. Have a piece of untoasted bread as your snack. We are going neutral, baby. And tell my wife I said hello.
And this is written by, once again, the Avatar: The Last Airbender alumni, John O'Brien, coming through with another banger.
And John O'Brien is arguably probably one of the best candidates to get for any Ionian story. Yeah. Like this is like the section of Runeterra that is made up for the Avatar guys. So why not get him?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's thriving.
And before we get into a story best told in 3 parts, we want to let you know, if you want some more information about Shen before you get this information, go to episode 15. It's been a while. It was actually back when we sometimes would do double episodes where we did 2 characters that were related. And that episode, I think, is Zed and Shen. And we talk a lot about them. And they do show up in some other stories. We don't want to spoil what stories they show up in.
Right. We'll touch on it a little bit as to why, like, that'll be like, our hangout period at the end of this. Yeah, so if you're interested in that, if you're interested in that, come hang out with us. But if you're just here for the story, we're going to the story. Don't worry.
All right. Part 1. We start with Shen talking to a fisherman about a recent tragic shipwreck. I know we just talked about Bilgewater, but we're not in Bilgewater. Ionia has shores as well. And the fisherman says it wasn't a natural disaster. It was a spirit.
This is like the most quintessential way to start off a good story for any coastlining nation. Just like, it were a spirit, I tell you. Took my catch. I lost everything.
It's funny because, like, technically, wouldn't a spirit be natural disaster because they do occur in nature in this
I,
world? Like, it's almost like a whale hitting your ship, right? Rather, I guess so. No, no, it wouldn't be.
yeah, I like as far as like within in this realm, right? Like they, like the Ionians, like for the as the general populace is
Yeah,
aware of the spirits there, but they ignore them kind of mostly.
yeah.
So this is more of like the American behavior of like we're going to mess up with the definition to meet our own needs here. So yeah, you could argue it's a natural disaster, but I need my insurance to cover it. So
Good
that
point.
spirit knew exactly what it was doing.
So Shen's like, okay. Well, he doesn't really say anything. Shen's more of a nodding person. So he nods. And they head over to a beach where it happened. And some villagers are there and they're recovering some of the drowned bodies out of the wreckage. And Shen looks at the splintered wood of the ship and sees claw marks. So he's like, okay, this is some evidence here. And one thing you'll notice is Shen is a detective. He's the quiet type, but he's always very observant. And the fisherman tells him that out of total, he was the only person that survived, and 6 people were killed.
Yeah. And as far as like the with the detective work here, like Shen is also just like you could almost say to a fault he is as objective as possible
Yeah.
because like he's even found the claw marks and he is still not said like yeah this is detective work or like the work of the spirits, right? It is
Yeah.
just like okay cool it wasn't a tempest. That's literally all it is to him. He is not ruled out like the monsters of the deep. He is not ruled
Yeah.
out like of Lastaya. It's just like okay, no claw marks. Like he is objective. So he's just like okay, cool. Like how many survivors? How many died? All right, cool. Take me to the place where it happened. Like it's just no
By the book,
by the
baby.
by the books only.
So this takes us to part 2 of the story, and Shen investigates further. And he finds, stuck to a broken piece of the hull, a small tuft of hair. And once he touches it, it completely dissolves into nothing. So now confirmed, Shen tells the fisherman it is a spirit, and specifically, it's a demon spirit.
And this is where we will kind of mention like some of the other stories as far as like the differences between like a demon spirit and the other spirits.
Mhm.
And our story where we go through like the bow and the konai, the bow and the kunai.
The Kodai!
Konai!
Bakumono.
Konai, the science guy. All right.
Okay.
um, but yeah, so our story, the bow and the kunai, like that really goes into like there are spirits and there are demon spirits, and especially like with the demon spirits, this is where the Kinku order is like going into their wheelhouse. This is what they were formed for. This is what they are here to protect Ionia and the spirit realm from, is imbalances that can create demon spirits. But go listen to Bo and the Kunai if you want those details as to the balance itself.
Yeah, so confirms it's a demon, and we get some details here just about spirits in the mortal realm. And it turns out that spirits like to hang out in the physical realm, since specifically in Ionia, the barrier between the two is thinner than anywhere else, as far as we know. And this concept we'll talk more about in our discussion section. But Shen also thinks about how he is a man trapped between realms. When he's in the mortal realm, people are kind of weird around him. If you listen to the Bow and the Kunai, both parts, even kids kind of are wary of him, even though they do trust him because he is trustworthy. It's just that he's weird, right? But to them, he's a ghost. And in the spirit realm, when he's walking around doing his thing, he's a sack of meat. You're not supposed to be.
Like he looks like a Happy Meal in some places of the spirit realm.
Yeah.
But I mean, also like it's totally normal, in my opinion, that people are going to be weird around Shin because, again, like he mentions that the veil is so thin that since he can understand that veil and traverse through it, he just has a penchant to just show up,
Yeah.
to just appear. I'd be freaked out too with a ninja with 2 swords on his back, fully masked up, just appeared in front of me and was like, "Sup?" Like, no, you not cool. That's not.
He's self-aware too that when people react to him just appearing places, to him, he's just walking. But he's phasing in and out of the spirit realm. So distance is different and whatever, but to him, he doesn't concern himself with such quibbles.
Like, your sense of comfort means nothing to me. I'm just going to the store.
That's like a Dark Souls boss line. So during this moment, we also get him kind of reflecting on his father before him, who pretty much set his expectations for what it means to be the Eye of the Twilight. This is the gig, and he's cool with it because it fits his personality so well. So after all these, this bit of preliminary detective work, he looks at the corpses and then promises the fisherman, "I'll solve the problem."
And as far as like with at this point, you know, when Shen says he'll solve the problem, you can't assume you know what the answer is. Because like, and like this, throwing back to like the original like bio when we covered Shin, I like to compare him to like Doctor Strange, where it's just like, no, I will solve the problem, but it might not be the problem you're looking at, because it's a problem you can't see, because I have looked at a billion timelines and I know what needs to be fixed. So this is such a loaded statement from Shin of like, yeah, no, I'll fix it. What do you mean? What do you mean you'll fix it? And we don't know that. And it's really hammered home as far as like before we get to part 3 that we don't know what it means.
And, at this moment, he can, and one thing Shen doesn't like is surprises, even though he surprises people when he shows up. So suddenly we have some holy men appear, and they've been sent by the local temple, and he's familiar with this, so he's not surprised in the sense that they're there. It's just he was about to go do the thing, and now he has to deal with the feds showing up, right? And they're carrying mystical trinkets, they're carrying oils, and they just start beginning rituals, right? Cleansing rituals. They've done none of the detective work he's done. They just came with their tools and started working. You can tell that even though he doesn't show it, he's kind of peeved about it. And one of the men kind of look him up and down, size him up, and say, "You're going to help us, right?" And all Shen says is, "Balance will be restored." And then he walks away.
And again, like with Shen walking away, he took 3 steps and disappeared. So one, that's the image that these guys get, is just balance will be restored. He's gone. And then like, as far as like to your point that it's like Shen is a little peeved with their appearance, he did all the detective work, and I'm not just saying that to be like, oh, he did the work and they did nothing. No, he did detective work, and these guys are basically like janitors, showing up on a crime scene and just start dumping bleach everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd be pissed too if I was the detective. Like, what are you doing on my crime scene? I'm trying to work here. But Shen's solution to it is just to peace out. And
if
that takes us to part 3.
Yeah, if you could see one of his eyebrows, it definitely raised a bit.
100%.
Under the mask. So part 3 starts with Shen continuing his tracking efforts. So he has the information he needs. So he now is tracking these little things of hair, and obviously not touching them because they'll disappear. And he's thinking about how to handle the situation as he's reaching his destination. And we notice, I think most people have noticed if you play the game, Shen has 2 swords. One is your standard, I say standard. Shen is a large guy. So one of them is a very sharp, very long steel saber that can cleave people in half without much effort. And the other one is purely made of arcane energy, and it's meant for non-mortal beings. You've probably seen this if you watch any like vampire media, like Blade style stuff, where, oh, this sword is specifically for killing vampires, or this sword is specifically for killing werewolves, that kind of stuff. And the plan is simple once he gets down to brass tacks, because it's Shen: use the arcane blade, slay the demon.
And I, for one, will argue that instead of going down the vampire route,
Mhm.
while still kind of staying in that same lane, this to me, like as far as this scene, screams The Witcher.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
like like
Exactly.
this is like straight out of like one of Sapkowski's books
Yeah.
of just like no, like you have your steel blade for man and the silver blade for monsters, whereas for Shin, you know, it's arcane blade for the spirits. But it also matches more because he did all the detective work. Like that is Geralt to a fault,
Yeah.
right? Like there's
That's a
like
great example.
yeah, like he goes in, he tries to like you know, it's like, oh, like you got attacked by a spirit. Yeah, I don't believe in spirits. Let me look around. Okay, no, I know what kind of demon it is. Now let me do some prep work to track him down. Um, and that's exactly what Shin's doing here. And so I love like this little kind of to me it feels like a tip of the hat to The Witcher of just like yeah, like describing the two blades and I figured out what actually happened on the shipwreck with the smallest little clues and I know what I need to do to go and fix this now.
Yeah, even to the emotions, it fits very well on that order and how Witchers how they're affected by their powers and what it dude, I never
Yeah.
even thought about him being a Witcher.
Oh, and and when we go deeper into this story, it fits even more because then
Yeah.
it actually feels like some of the choices you have to make in the game.
That's a great example. And it also helps with the juxtaposition from like a Vane, where Vane also does detective work, but she has emotion and she is malicious towards monsters. So she
Yeah.
feeds on it. So even though they kind of do the same thing, it's a different approach.
Yeah. I would also love to see like a Shen story that kind of feels more like The Witcher too, because
Yeah.
then I can imagine a Riot produced animation and then a Riot produced product that has one of their characters just looking at the camera and going, fuck.
So yeah, we're gonna boil like I mean, we mentioned that Vane is Batman, which fits very well. So him being girl makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like because he's not driven by vengeance.
Yeah. So Shen finds the beast because he's good at what he does, and is just laying on a sandbar, sleeping after a meal, as many do. And he slowly begins approaching it, and then suddenly he hears these shrill cries, but they sound familiar. They're shocking, but he knows what it sounds like. And then he hears more, and then he hears more, and he knows it's the sound of dying spirits. So he's looking around, and he looks at his sword, he puts his hands together, and then disappears.
And man, this is like some quintessential Shin behavior
Yeah.
at its finest. Because again, we found the source of the shipwreck problem. We all think we know what's going to happen. And then Shin just goes, nah. And then he's gone. But again, I love to point these little details out in the stories, like as far as like him putting his hands together and getting out of there. Like that's a great like little visual of his ultimate in
Yep.
game, right? Like that's a really cool way of showing it too, as far as like without disrupting the narrative, because it fits the narrative, right? Because he's here to restore balance. That's what exactly what he said, and it's like okay, I found the culprit to the shipwreck but I found some more clues, and those clues are the screams. I need to go to the screams.
Yeah. So
Peace.
he appears again where he started at the side of the shipwreck. And there's multiple pools of this black ooze that's kind of dissipating as well. And he begins to count them. And until one of the men interrupts his count, which once again, this is the most you get to see. I guess feel emotion for Shen. So he interrupts his count. And this guy specifically is holding like this metal leash that's attached to an imp. And the imp is crying and wailing. It's just on this leash. And then he goes over to Shen. And you can tell Shen's like, you idiot.
And I mean, this is exactly as far as like the perfect way to like tie up in a bow the frustration that he had when
Yeah.
he first saw these guys, right? It was because it's like, no, I'm the professional at work
Yeah.
here. And y'all aren't even looking at half the picture. Forget looking at half the picture. You're looking at less than that.
Yeah.
So it's like, just don't get in my way. Just don't get in my way. And for me to restore balance, I have to make sure that the spirits are taken care of as well. And here you are dragging a spirit to an execution. Bro, I just said don't get in my way. This is the exact opposite of what I said.
It's due process, right? He's
Yep.
ensuring that he's going through the proper steps that are dictated by being the Eye of the Twilight.
Yep.
Whereas you would think a temple, a holy temple with men, holy men that are sent, wouldn't operate just like a standard bureaucracy who could care less, will cut corners just to get the job done and move on. But that's exactly what's happening here.
Oh man, a religious entity cutting corners to get a job done. I'm glad this is a fantasy world we're talking about.
Shh, we might have the Catholic Church listening. You can't.
Oh, we both know it's too late for that, Ryan.
So Shen even mentions that this crying imp is insignificant. It has nothing to do with what's going on. He knows that because he did the work. And the holy man looks at him and he says, "Can you dispose of this?" Remember, Shen doesn't see himself as working with them. He's working for a greater purpose. So the fat guy's like, "Hey, can you dispose of this?" and tries to hand him the leash. Shen stares at him, as he does most people, and then he apologizes to the man for what he must do. And he sheathes his spirit sword and draws the steel one. And that's where the story ends.
Yeah, and I again like this is where like I love like the comparison to The Witcher because this really does feel like a story straight out of like Witcher 3 where it's like the oh god what do they call it? The Children of the Flame.
Yeah.
And like going to Geralt and being like, hey, go ahead and help us dispose of these mutants. And Geralt being like, "But they're fine. They're sentient beings
Yeah.
that are doing nothing. What do you mean? You know what? Yeah, don't worry. I will take care of the problem. Draw steel." And and again, this is also where I would love to have like more of the Witcher kind of feel animation with Shin because this is the perfect moment. Like him looking at the holy man, telling him, "Can you dispose of this guy for me?"
Yeah.
That's a perfect moment for Shin to do the fuck.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, John O'Brien hasn't failed us yet. When I think, you think about like basketball and the big three, for
Yeah.
for Ryan, it's unfortunate Graham McNeil's currently not on staff at the moment, but like Graham McNeil, Anthony Reynolds, and John O'Brien,
They're the big three.
those were our big
100%.
three for the staff.
Yep.
But that being said, that's a hell of an ending for a story that's very short. So if you listen to our last episode, this isn't much longer than the Tarek story. We made some references there between the two and the relation between the characters. So that's where it ends, but it's so satisfying. And then this takes us to our discussion portion where Hetch and I like to have a bit of fun. And one of the first things we want to talk about is the actual mention of this thin barrier concept. Now, if you've listened to our episodes, you know we've done a lot. We've covered a lot of things.
We may have recorded an episode or two. There's only like a couple hundred hours of content.
Yeah, and there's so much ethereal meta world stuff that we talk about, celestials, the deep, and the balance of individuals' power. We talk about how the Blessed Isles turn into the Shadow Isles, so on and so forth. We've not really talked about the actual barrier that separates the two worlds and it having a dimension to it.
We like it's kind of a weird thing because like the only story that we've really ever touched on that kind of even references how thin that barrier is in Ionia is Ivern.
Yeah.
And it's more of a throwaway comment in Ivern's tale, right? Whereas like with this, I think that's one of the most important takeaways from this story is that this fisherman basically just kind of sailed through a part of the water where without knowing it, he was in the spirit realm.
Yeah.
And how would you know that when you're out in the water? Like if you're miles and miles away from shore, it's just, water and horizon as far as you can see. And before the fisherman knew it, all his whole crew is dead and he's having to swim back to shore
Yeah.
without having the slightest of idea what happened. So I think that's like definitely the biggest takeaway here is like not only how thin the barrier is, but the fact that the mortals are constantly going into it without knowing it. Whereas the only thing that sets Shen apart from them is that he knows it. He's doing it willingly. And that's also why they're freaked out because it's like, oh, God, where did you come from?
Yeah, and to build on that, us with the knowledge we have, I immediately thought about the geography of the situation. So Shen's doing his detective work. I'm like, okay, we have already defined here that the Bermuda Triangle is somewhere south of Ionia and east of Bilgewater and north of the Spirit Isles / Blessed Isles, right? So that means he was probably somewhere in the South Beach area, which is that's how good. So this just reinforces how good Riot stuff is when it comes to writing, because we can draw that reference with the information we have.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we keep talking about the author so much and like, mentioning the big three before this discussion, because you have to build that world for all these different pieces to connect together.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're having these pieces connect from multiple authors with very different backgrounds, because I mean, Avatar Last Airbender is nothing like Warhammer.
Wait, what?
Can you see Aang in the Grim Dark?
I thought Avatar was just like Warhammer Gaiden. Like,
yeah. Now I just want an image of like Aang just like standing in front of like this larger than a planet entity and being like, "Hi there, Corn. You want to pet my bison?"
But to go back to the thin barrier concept, obviously with how our brains work, when I saw thin barrier, I was like, so where is it thick? And and not in a way, not a meme way.
I hate you so much sometimes. You pronounced it in the meme way, and you know you did.
I'm sorry, not two C's. Not two C's. But I thought about, okay, where's what can we draw from to understand the barrier in other places? And I would think usually a thicker barrier would probably occur in population centers like Piltover Zon, because there's such a dense amount of people, and because of the turmoil that's already happening in the mortal realm, there's no space for spirit realm to exist and to play around in there. Whereas when you look at Shurima Ishtal would have a thin barrier, which from our episodes where we talk about the creatures and the people that live there makes more sense when you know those stories. But when you look at Shurima has a past of Icathia and the void and so many things that are disruptive. You wouldn't have such a spiritual presence there as you would in its neighbor that's right there to its east.
And we definitely get to see that reflected as well in the like the characters themselves, because like with you mentioning like Piltover Zon, like where the barrier would in theory be thick, like the characters coming out of there are either using hex tech or like Zomnite chem tech kind of things, right? Like it's very steampunk feel to it, whereas like with your mention of Ishtal, a character like Nidalee, Nidalee has met Vestians, and other Vestians have looked at Nidalee and like, what the hell are you? Like, and so like there's the fact that like there's no real explanation for that. It's kind of reinforces this theory. So I'm definitely inclined to agree with you on that. It also kind of fits up just kind of more with like the human ideology as well. Like, there's always a kind of a that's something that you can have a discussion, especially if you're looking at a more philosophical look to your discussion, that comes up a lot as far as like the reliance on technology takes away like any kind of spiritual connection to the world itself, right? So it fits in that narrative, and it's reflected in the storytelling too. So I like that theory. And then it's like the only thing that really kind of like throws like like an argument to it is like a place like the Freljord, because again like the Freljord is a very strange place just because of like the nature itself,
Yeah.
right? But they also like the fact that like they have demigods that are still acknowledged and still have effects on the physical plane that all the mortals know about kind of creates this weird dynamic where they like have almost thickened the barrier without realizing it
Yeah.
while simultaneously being as spiritual as possible. Because I mean, like with Ivern's story, which we did do his bio if you want to go listen to that. But I mean, Ivern left the Freljord to go try to find like, find these places where the spirits were, right? Like he was on a killing spree. But it wasn't until he left the Freljord that we got to see that blur of, you know, the barrier being thin. Whereas you would think in theory that like there are literal shamans that can shapeshift into animals in the Freljord. The barrier should be thinner there, but
Wait,
it's not.
do you mean Aurora? I don't think we've done Ivern yet.
Oh no, we did Iron.
We did. Has it been that long? You sure?
I'm fairly confident. Hang on.
Okay. Listen, I think the point stands, right? And we will talk about Ivern more because Ivern is a great point of reference when it comes to the interconnection between Ionia and other places. And we don't get many characters for that because immediately I thought to myself, I want to see Shen go to Piltover, right? I want to see what that does. I mean, to get him there would take a lot of work, but
Yeah, it would take a lot of work as far as getting him there, but you know, with us speaking about like, you know, or taking the time to gush over the authors and how much that we do enjoy, you know, like stories from the big three here. Like if you haven't listened to some of like the other content that we've done with like the Kinku order,
yeah.
or specifically if you haven't listened to the content that we've done with Jin, uh we have the tool necessary to get Shen wherever he needs to
And he can get there pretty quickly. Well, actually, we don't know that. Because of the barrier situation, we don't know if it's harder for him to travel through the spirit realm to get to other places where there isn't such a presence. But we do talk about Ivern in our Lilia episode, right? And
Right.
that's another reference to the guarding of the spirit realm and its place and things. And even when we talk about, like you mentioned, Italy, which is a great example in Ishtal, but also we talked about Nico. And Nico, even though she leaves or not really wanting to leave Ionia in the way she does, but when she gets to Ishtal, like the jungles of Ishtal, she feels comfortable. That would make sense because Ishtal still has a purity to it.
And I like that also reinforces as far as like with the barrier being thin, because it may be something that like because a character like Nico, especially a character like Nico,
Yeah.
it isn't necessarily going to have like a spiritual connection as far as like, or not so much a spiritual connection, but like the academic ability
Yes.
to define it,
Yeah.
right? Is just like, no, this feels right. And which I think like kind of plays more into like you, because the vast majority of characters don't have the academic thing because for the most part where the barrier's thin, you don't know you're going through it.
Yeah.
And the only other times outside of the Kinku order that we get like any kind of like, you know, dimension swapping is with Yordles.
Yes.
And that's not in the
Yes.
spirit realm. That's they're off doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird thing, and the fact that the Yordles are doing their own thing is one of the reasons why we get to see them so heavily in Piltover and Zaun too, right? Like they don't care that the spiritual connection in such a crowded metropolis is very difficult because like we're not in the spirit realm anyways. But what you guys are doing looks like fun. I want to do that. Boom.
Yeah, and I mean it's obligatory that we reference since it's been a while that and Zillion is somewhere else. Everyone's in these realms, and Zillion is trapped between time, and no one can find him. And it's always so good. The fact we got to revisit our boy to catch up. But all that being said, what it comes down to, we've had a lengthy discussion section, but Shen is just a cool concept for a ninja character. Like Zed is more traditional. Kali's more traditional. Kennan's fun, but still pretty much a standard take. Shen is very different. And even when he was released, I knew he was popular because there was like a tank ninja with a spirit sword.
Yeah, like he got memed on so hard for the longest time because of that. And now I can confirm that you are right. I am thinking of our Lilia episode. But, like, so I still, I mean,
Yes.
I mentioned it in the Lilia episode too. That it's like, you know, like Ivern is involved.
But now we have to talk about Ivern, which we love. We're gonna do it anyways because that story is a good one.
Oh yeah, the Ivern story is great. But yeah, like speaking of characters that we love to talk about, like Shen is up there just because of how pivotal his role is to like Runeterra as a whole. And no one knows it. Like no one realizes it. And even those who do get to realize it, 9 times out of 10, it's too late for them.
Yeah.
Because by the time they realize it, he's drawn steel.
All right, we'll leave it there. We've given you plenty to chew on there. But as always, if you've made it this far, you know, we appreciate when you guys listen to the main content, but if you listen to discussions as well, you know, say something. If you have an opinion that's different from ours, we definitely want to hear it because it's just more world building.
Yeah, and you know, hit us up either on the social medias or podcastcore@gmail.com. Like we enjoy talking to each other here, so like we're gonna have this discussion time, but it's a discussion time. Like we'd love to hear your feedback and like talk with you guys too. So just hit us up. Like we're nerds. We'll talk about this crap until the sun goes down.
So with that, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah, take care, everybody.